Hello, and welcome to tonight's gentle tale. I'm so glad you've joined me here, where the world slows and softens like pages turning in the quiet hush of an old library. Tonight, we'll step into a place where rain whispers against ancient windows, where stories breathe in the stillness, and where the night holds a special kind of magic. It's a world of warm lamplight, of leather-bound books that hum with secrets, and of quiet souls who find solace among the shelves. All you need to do is settle in, let your thoughts drift like the rain outside, and allow yourself to be carried into this haven of words and wonder. And when you're ready, we'll begin just as the clock tower chimes and the first drops of rain start to fall. The rain began as evening settled over the old university district, a gentle percussion that would accompany the night's quiet ritual. Each droplet found its way down the weathered limestone walls of Pemberton Library, tracing silver paths along windows that had witnessed decades of scholarly pursuits and whispered discoveries. Inside the grand building, the last of the day's visitors had departed hours ago, leaving behind only the soft echo of their footsteps and the lingering warmth of lives briefly intersected among the towering shelves. Dr. Eleanor Marsh moved through the library's corridors with the unhurried grace of someone who had found her sanctuary. At 73, she served as the night librarian, a position she had requested specifically, drawn to the profound stillness that settled over the collection when darkness claimed the world beyond the tall windows. The library at night was an entirely different creature than its daytime self. Gone were the rustling papers, the muted conversations, the gentle hum of academic energy. In their place settled something deeper, a breathing quiet, as if the thousands of volumes exhaled collectively, releasing their stories into the hushed air. Eleanor's footsteps whispered against the polished wooden floors as she made her evening rounds. Her soft-soled shoes had learned the rhythm of these halls, which boards creaked with memory, which corners held the deepest shadows, which alcoves cradled the most perfect silence. The rain's tempo increased gradually, a lullaby written by the sky and performed on the library's slate roof. Each drop seemed to carry with it stories of the clouds it had traveled, of the places it had seen on its journey earthward. Eleanor paused by one of the great arched windows, watching the water stream down the glass in intricate patterns like tears of contentment. Through the rain-blurred window, the campus beyond appeared as an impressionist painting, soft edges and gentle lights smearing together in a symphony of amber and shadow. The old clock tower, barely visible through the downpour, chimed 9 times, its bronze voice carrying through the storm like a gentle reminder that time moved differently here, slowly and deliberately, like honey poured from an ancient jar. Eleanor continued her journey through the stacks, her fingers trailing along the spines of countless books. Each volume held within it entire worlds, adventures and romances, philosophies and discoveries, dreams both fulfilled and abandoned. She had always believed that libraries were not merely repositories repositories of knowledge, but sanctuaries for the soul, places where the boundaries between the possible and impossible grew beautifully thin. In the literature section, she paused before a shelf of poetry collections, their leather bindings worn smooth by countless hands. She selected a slim volume, Rilke's Verses, and opened it to a familiar page. The poet's words seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the rain, speaking of solitude as a gift rather than a burden, of quiet moments that held more truth than a lifetime of noise. The reading room stretched before her like a cathedral of knowledge. Tall windows punctuated the walls between towering bookcases, and heavy wooden tables sat in perfect rows, their surfaces polished to a warm gleam by generations of study and contemplation. Above, pendant lights hung like captured stars, their warm glow creating pools of amber light that seemed to hold fragments of every conversation, every revelation, every peaceful moment that had ever occurred beneath them. Eleanor settled into one of the deep leather armchairs near the central reading area. The chair embraced her with the familiarity of an old friend, its cushions shaped by decades of readers who had sought comfort in this exact spot. She opened the poetry collection across her lap, but her eyes drifted to the window beside her, where the rain continued its gentle percussion against the glass. The storm outside seemed to wrap around the building like a protective blanket, sealing the library away from the rush and worry of the wider world. Here, in this capsule of learning and dreams, time moved to its own rhythm, measured not by clocks or schedules, but by the turning of pages and the soft intake of breath that accompanies a particularly beautiful passage. A distant sound caught her attention, the gentle turning of pages somewhere in the building's depths. Eleanor smiled knowingly. She was not alone tonight. Somewhere among the stacks, another soul had found refuge in this temple of words, drawn by the same magnetic pull that had brought Eleanor here years ago. She rose from her chair and followed the sound, her footsteps muffled by the library's thick carpeting. The page turning led her deeper into the building, past the science section with its precise rows of journals and texts, past the history alcove where centuries of human experience waited patiently to share their lessons. In a small reading nook tucked between ancient philosophy and medieval literature, Eleanor discovered the source of the sound. A young woman sat curled in a window seat, her legs drawn up beneath her, completely absorbed in a thick novel. Rain drummed against the glass beside her, creating a shifting backdrop of liquid light that painted her concentration in ever-changing patterns of shadow and illumination. The woman looked up as Eleanor approached, startled to discover she wasn't alone. Her eyes held the slightly dazed expression of someone who had been traveling through narrative worlds for hours, only to suddenly find herself called back to reality. "I'm sorry," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "I know the library is closed, but I was here doing research when the storm started, and I didn't want to leave." Eleanor's smile was warm as summer honey. "My dear, you're welcome to stay as long as you like. In weather like this, the library becomes exactly what it was always meant to be, a shelter for souls who need quiet sanctuary. The young woman, Sarah. She introduced herself, was a graduate student researching medieval manuscripts. She had been working late when the storm began, and something about the combination of rain, solitude, and the presence of so many books had cast a spell that made leaving impossible. "I've never experienced anything quite like this," Sarah confessed, gesturing toward the rain-washed window. "It's as if the storm has made the library even more magical than usual." Eleanor nodded with understanding. Rain has always been this place's most faithful companion. It knows how to make the silence deeper, how to make the stories feel more real. "Would you like some tea? I always keep a pot brewing on nights like this." Together, they made their way to Eleanor's small office, tucked behind the circulation desk like a cozy cave. The office was a wonder of accumulated comfort. Shelves lined with personal favorites, a small electric kettle perpetually ready for tea, a reading lamp that cast the warmest possible light, and a window that framed the storm like a living painting. Eleanor prepared chamomile tea with practiced grace, the familiar ritual made more precious by the presence of rain and the rare gift of companionship. The kettle's gentle whistle harmonized with the storm, and soon the office filled with the soothing aroma of herbs and honey. "Tell me about your research," Eleanor invited, settling into her chair with her steaming mug. "What treasures are you uncovering in those ancient texts?" Sarah's eyes lit with the passion that comes from pursuing something meaningful. She spoke of illuminated manuscripts, of scribes who had worked by candlelight centuries ago, of stories that had survived wars and disasters and the simple passage of time. Her voice grew soft with wonder as she described the marginalia, the little notes and drawings that medieval readers had left in the borders of texts, personal conversations across centuries. "Sometimes," Sarah confessed, "when I'm reading their notes, I feel like I'm sitting right there with them, as if time has folded somehow, and we're all just readers sharing the same eternal moment." The rain continued its gentle symphony against the windows, and Eleanor found herself thinking about all the nights she had spent in this library, all the books that had kept her company, all the quiet epiphanies that had bloomed in the space between one page and the next. The library held so many invisible moments like this one, connections formed between readers and stories, between past and present, between souls who might never meet, but who shared the common language of wonder. "Would you like to see something special?" Eleanor asked, her eyes twinkling with the anticipation of sharing a treasured secret. She led Sarah deeper into the library's heart, past sections most visitors never discovered, to a small room marked only with a discreet brass plate reading "Special Collections." Eleanor produced an old-fashioned key from her pocket and unlocked the heavy wooden door. Inside, the air held the concentrated essence of centuries, leather and parchment, ink and wisdom, dreams preserved in their most tangible form. Glass cases lined the walls, containing manuscripts so old their pages seemed to glow with inner light. But Eleanor guided Sarah past these precious exhibits to an unremarkable wooden shelf near the back of the room. "These," she said, withdrawing a leather-bound journal, "are my most treasured collection." The journal contained entries from night librarians, stretching back over 100 years, thoughts and observations, sketches of favorite reading corners, pressed flowers from the library garden, and most beautifully, stories of the perfect moments that had unfolded in the building's embrace. Each night, librarian has kept a record, Eleanor explained, turning pages filled with different handwritings, different perspectives on the same eternal experience. We are the guardians, not just of books, but of the quiet magic that happens when people encounter stories in solitude. Sarah read entries describing similar nights to this one, storms that had transformed the library into an island of peace, readers who had discovered themselves between the lines of beloved books, moments when the boundary between literature and life had dissolved completely. "Listen to this one," Eleanor said, finding a particular passage. Her voice took on the cadence of rain as she read. "Tonight the storm spoke to every book on every shelf, and I swear I could hear them whispering back, all the love stories agreeing with the rain about romance, all the adventure tales harmonizing with the thunder about courage, all the poetry collections singing along with the wind about beauty." The young woman's eyes grew bright with recognition. "That's exactly how it feels," she whispered, "as if the books are more alive tonight than usual." They spent the next hour reading from the journal, discovering a lineage of night librarians who had all been touched by the same mysterious alchemy that transforms libraries after dark. Each entry was a love letter to solitude, to books, to the profound peace that settles over the world when rain provides the soundtrack for reading. Eventually, Eleanor prepared to return to her rounds, but she invited Sarah to remain in the special collections room for as long as she wished. "Consider yourself an honorary night librarian," she said with a warm smile. "The books here rarely get visitors who understand their particular magic." Alone in the room, Sarah settled into a comfortable chair, positioned perfectly between two tall windows. The rain continued its lullaby, and the ancient books seemed to lean closer, as if eager to share their secrets. She opened a volume of medieval poetry and found herself transported not just to another time, but to a state of consciousness where every word seemed personally chosen for this moment, this night, this perfect convergence of storm and story. Meanwhile, Eleanor continued her peaceful journey through the library's corridors. The building felt especially alive tonight, filled with the kind of energy that accumulates when rain and solitude and thousands of stories converge in a single space. She paused in the children's section, where picture books sat on low shelves like colorful promises of wonder, their illustrations ready to spring to life at the slightest invitation. In the biography section, she touched the spine of a volume about lighthouse keepers, thinking about the similarities between their work and her own, maintaining a beacon, providing safe harbor, watching over the night while others slept. The metaphor felt especially fitting tonight, with the storm raging outside and the library glowing like a lighthouse of learning in the darkness. The philosophy section welcomed her with its promise of eternal questions and provisional answers. Here, the great thinkers of history sat in judgment of each other and themselves, their arguments preserved in leather and paper like fossils of human curiosity. Eleanor had spent countless nights wandering these aisles, finding comfort in the knowledge that wondering and questioning were among humanity's most noble pursuits. As she moved through the religion and spirituality section, Eleanor reflected on how the library had become her cathedral, books her congregation, silence her prayer. There was something deeply spiritual about the act of preserving stories, of maintaining a space where anyone could encounter ideas that might change their life. Each book was an act of faith, faith that words mattered, that stories could heal, that someone somewhere needed exactly the wisdom contained within those pages. The clock tower chimed 11 as Eleanor completed her circuit and returned to check on Sarah. She found the young woman still absorbed in reading, but her posture had relaxed into the kind of complete comfort that comes from feeling perfectly at home in an unexpected place. "How are you feeling?" Eleanor asked softly. Sarah looked up with eyes that held the peaceful exhaustion of someone who had traveled far without leaving their chair. "Like I never want to leave," she admitted. "I had no idea how much I needed this perfect quiet, this feeling of being held by something larger than myself." Eleanor understood completely. The library had been her refuge during difficult times, her celebration space during joyful ones, and her constant companion through all the ordinary moments that made up a life. There was something about being surrounded by hundreds of thousands of stories that made personal troubles feel both more manageable and somehow less important. "The storm is beginning to soften," Eleanor observed, listening to the rain's gentler rhythm. "But you're welcome to stay until morning if you like. Sometimes the best reading happens in those deep hours before dawn, when the world is at its quietest and books reveal their most secret truths." Sarah smiled gratefully and returned to her medieval poetry. Eleanor settled nearby with her own book, a collection of essays about the nature of time that seemed perfectly suited to a night when minutes felt like hours and hours like minutes. The rain continued its lullaby, softer now but no less soothing. The library breathed around them, its ancient wood settling with gentle creaks, its thousands of stories whispering their presence in the susurrus of air moving through the stacks. In this perfect memento of solitude and companionship, of storm and shelter, of books and belonging, both women found themselves exactly where they needed to be. The library wrapped around them like a mother's embrace. The rain blessed them with its liquid music, and the books offered their infinite gift of worlds upon worlds, waiting patiently to be discovered by anyone brave enough to seek wonder in the darkness between one page and the next. Outside, the night deepened toward dawn, but inside, time moved to its own rhythm, measured not by clocks, but by the gentle turning of pages and the soft sound of rain carrying dreams on the wind.